Welcome back to Around the Beat, HoopsHype show that brings you the pulse of every team. This week, we are in the NO with Shammit, right? Did I say that correctly? Thank you. I wanted to make sure I had. Now, you are probably one of the longest tenured Pelicans writers, reporters, and I think it's a privilege to have you on. So, first off, how have you been this season, and how has everything treated you down in the Bayou?
Yeah, look, I love being down here in New Orleans, and it's certainly never a thing you can take for granted when you get to cover an NBA team. So I think it's a privilege to have one in your city in the first place, and then to be able to, get the access and to be able to get boots on the ground. I'm never gonna take that for granted. So it's been great, despite the team itself not having a ton of success. I've certainly had a lot of fun for sure.
Hey, that's the best thing, when you're working, and it's fun at the very least because it doesn't make it seem like it's work. Sam, was there anything you wanted to get out of the way before we started to talk about the Pelicans? I think this is a season that Dejounte Murray coming back really has lit a fire, and this is just not even something that we had planned to talk about. But what are your thoughts? I don't know if you've noticed this, Sam, but it's been a really cool thing how everyone's kind of galvanized around, regardless win or loss, but around the energy and the professionalism that Dejounte brings.
I think like they were in LA for a couple of weeks, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, and I was in the locker room briefly. It just feels like they're kind of like, you know how long the season is for a lot of these teams, and they just kind of a lot of the time they don't play for anything in a way. Like they just kind of go through the motions. You add a big piece like that back into the rotation. It kind of gets the guys all like refocused, relocked in. It's like kind of like I don't know, in a way like a kid at a new school or something. I don't know how to describe it at the moment, but it just kind of feels different. Like their season has just, even though I think they know in the back of their mind they have no shots playing or anything, but it's just kind of like, maybe they don't have any purpose to lose games anymore. So you might as well try to see a light at the end of the tunnel, maybe build some momentum for next season.
Shamit, do you feel a palpable change since, I guess, Dejounte's return from injury in the energy?
Yeah, he definitely brings a style of basketball and a style of personality that I think is not common in the NBA in general, but also just like on the Pelicans team specifically. They've lacked sort of this outspoken, in your face style of basketball player. I mean, maybe you have a couple of like bench players in the years past that have like played a little bit of an enforcer role, but Dejounte really wears his emotions on his sleeves, and I think it is infectious. It is something that everyone's like, well, this guy clearly cares so much. It'd be kind of an affront to not care as much as he does. So I do think that seeps in throughout the team, and he's someone that's coming off of one of the most devastating injuries in basketball, and he's got a lot to prove. And like he came out recently and said that he didn't request any kind of trades or and is happy to be in New Orleans, and I think that's great publicity. But like in the back of everybody's mind, they know that this is a new regime that unless you're Derek Queen, Jeremiah Fears, and Micah Peavy, like you're part of the previous regime, and there's no guarantee that you're going to be here. And it's in your best interest to continue to audition not only for this team but for every other team. And I think there's incentive in that in terms of playing hard. So, but to the other point, the Pelicans were starting to turn it around prior to Dejounte's return. It was mostly when Herb Jones got healthy again. They started trending towards winning games again. And I haven't checked their most recent record, but I think like something like from December, like they're like 17-11 when Herb Jones plays. And it's striking how different of a team it is when he's available and versus when he's not.
Definitely, especially when they actually are able to stop the opponent from, scoring the basketball. It's a lot easier to win games. For you, you kind of touched it right there. There's a new regime, and there are no loyalties when there is a changing of guards, especially for players on loaded contracts, on extensions that are going to hit and raise the salary cap for a team that is rebuilding. In your opinion, do you think Zion and others are gone? Do you think there's maybe a demeanor in the sense that they're kind of like their swan song in a sense? Like they know they have to play well because it's going to allow them to go to somewhere decent, but at the same time they maybe might not be as locked in as others. I'm not saying they're playing, always professional basketball or players are going to, play to win. But what is your thoughts on that sense? Do you see a difference in that kind of change?
Yeah, look, I think this front office group with Joe Dumars and Troy Weaver, they didn't make any significant transactions at the deadline. They moved off of Jose Alvarado, mostly to open up minutes for Jeremiah Fears because Dejounte Murray, as you can see, was on his way back. So I think with this management group, they still believe that they have a good team and they have a good core, and that's a belief that they held at last year's draft when they traded their pick that was unprotected. That's a belief that they held when they fired Willie Green because the team was not performing up to par. That's a belief they held at the deadline when they didn't move anybody from their core, and I think that's going to be something they are going to lean on, especially with the way the Pelicans are playing now that they are quote unquote full strength. I would not be surprised if they hit this summer. They look around and they say, look, we have the structure, the foundation of a good team, the vets with DeJounte and Herb Jones and Trey and even Zion. They can win you games if we can just make the right additions around the edges, the rookies take the right steps. This could be a team that is competitive in the West. And obviously you have to get lucky with health. But I think New Orleans believes it has a good team. So I would not be surprised if there's not that many moves made. Now, there's always that wild card of, well, will they get obsessed with someone in this draft cycle and will they move heaven and earth to go get that player? That's a variable that we can't account for yet, but I think all signs sort of point to them doubling down on the current structure of the team.
I didn't even think about the possibility of them falling in love with a player and that being, the reason that they trade someone. I was more thinking that they would just, put people on the block. But that's actually a great point, especially with a draft class like this, where it seems like there might be 5 guys, 6 guys that are, franchise cornerstones outside of the top 3 that we know. Sam?
Yeah, just to go with Zion, it's just like you look at the plus and minuses with the guy that they traded away the first round pick, right? They're a Queen. They don't look good. And I remember asking Borrega when he was in LA about like what is it? Like, I think during that time Queen wasn't playing a lot because Zion came back and then Zion was just getting all those minutes. I asked him like, well, what is it going to take for him to get on the court more? And he's pretty much just said defense. He needs to improve his defense, just like be more aware, like just on switches and be more communicative. Just going off that, do you really see Zion like? Because I know, like Cyro said earlier, there's no loyalty with this new regime, right? So Zion is not Joe Dumars' guy. Like, is he on the way out this summer? And if so, like, do you feel like they'll get enough value for him?
I think it's the opposite. I think Zion's going to get extended. I know I sound crazy saying this, and I know other media members. Zach Lowe, I think recently suggested that Zion's been playing well. He's been available. This is the right time to trade him. I think if you approach it logically and you try to look at what your team is, you have those younger players. You as you mentioned, the Queen and Zion fit is extremely questionable together. Like the logical thing to do is, well, this is the healthiest stretch he's been in a long time. It's prudent to figure out what his value is and maybe move into a different direction. But I think they're all in on Zion. I think, when Joe Dumars got here, there was some tough conversations had with Zion and what the expectation is for professionalism and what the expectation is for him. And if he wants to reach some of the goals he has for himself as a player. And I think to Dumars' credit, like Zion really took that to heart. A lot of that transformation began, I would say, like last year that he started taking his body and his preparation really seriously. They did a lot of work with Daniel Bove, who recently just left him for the Philadelphia Flyers, to get Zion in incredible physical shape. And then they continued that work this summer, and Zion picked up a new personal trainer, Chris Cripps. Sorry, I struggle to say his name because it's basically Chris twice. And Zion's all bought in on what it takes to be a high performing professional, and he set a new streak for consecutive games played. He's had 2 injuries this season that he's come back from ahead of schedule, which is like entirely unprecedented. His trainers got him going in that right track, and so there's a lot of, I think, mutual trust between the organization and Zion now that, hey, like things are trending in the right direction. And ultimately, to me, I see that turning into an extension. I see that because Zion, one thing I can tell you from speaking to people that are knowledgeable about how he feels, he really wants to be in New Orleans, and he really, really wants the narrative on him to flip. Like, I think he's genuinely hurt that the narrative on him is that he's uncaring, that he's lazy, that he doesn't try. He wants to change that narrative, and prove to people that he can be this star that he was billed at, and he can do it consistently by staying on the court. Like that's his biggest goal right now.
Yeah, and I think last week he had an interview with ESPN where he kind of echoed that sort of sentiment that New Orleans is where he wants to be. I wanted to bring something up about Zion. I know you said it right there that the availability and his durability has been a big part in the reason for the team's direction the last 5 or so years. But one thing I was thinking was, yes, Brandon Ingram was an all-star. However, they never went out and got him a running mate or a true co-star like they repeatedly did for Anthony Davis, in terms that they had Drew Holiday. They went out and got Boogie. I know Boogie was where they were able to take advantage of an opportunity to get a player of that caliber. As well, they did a great job of developing these secondary pieces outside of Brandon Ingram with Herb Jones, Trey Murphy. Do you think that philosophy was a result of the prior regime maybe being hesitant or reluctant to go all in without Zion being fully healthy? And now with Joe Dumars, this is his third team technically, or second team. He was longtime Pistons guy, now here with the Pelicans. Do you think this is maybe his envisioning to actually invest into Zion, unlike they've done in the last X years of his career?
I mean, look, like if they were going all in on the Zion Williamson timeline, they would not have drafted 2 rookies this past season. And I think there are certain trades that happened this year. You look at Trae Young, you look at Anthony Davis, you look John Morant's on the market. Those are similar to that DeMarcus Cousins situations where you have all NBA level talent that might be available at a cost that is not typical for that level of talent. And they didn't bite on any of those. Now, that's not to say like, they don't bite on John Morant this summer. It seems unlikely, but that one's still out there. But to answer your question, this was a show me that we can believe in you type of season for Zion. And I think that's what the management's looking at it from. And I think to your question about David Griffin and his approach with Zion, I don't think Zion really gave them any real reason to commit the kind of resources that they committed to Anthony Davis under Dell Demps. Davis, while he was in and out of games, like he was still mostly healthy for the duration of his Pelicans career. And he was way more professional in how he approached the game. And I think more impactful as well. I think Davis, during his peak in New Orleans, was playing at a top 3 player level. Maybe I'm biased, but I think a lot of the analytics also like pointed to Davis being at least, top 5 level impact. And that is when you have that level of player who can be in the conversation for MVP and is a first team all NBA player. Yes, you can take bigger swings and you should invest in them more strongly. When you have a player who, is average like 35 games a year, I don't know if that's the exact number, it's close to it. You can't take those type of swings. And I think, Griffin and them never really had that proof of concept from Zion outside of, 20, 30 game stretches where he would look unbelievable, but that would be it. Davis made all NBA teams, made all defensive teams. Zion's made an all-star team twice, but he's never, had any kind of postseason awards or any postseason appearances to match Davis.
Just with Zion, if you were to, you think it's going to be an extension, like how many years and like how much do you think he'll get?
So he'll be eligible for 3 years, and I think at that 30% rate, the cap is going to be like the cap is rising at an unprecedented rate right now because of the new TV deal, but he'll be eligible for 30% of that cap as his max. And even though, like, with the extension rules, like, it'll be 140% of his like $42 million final year or something like that. It basically puts him in the range of like 3 years, $200 million, which is like an absurd amount to think about. I don't think he's going to get anywhere close to that amount. I don't think he should get anywhere close to that amount. I also think it's a debate if you should get an extension at all. But if I were to be doing that extension, I would model it after Julius Randle's extension. It was around 3 years, $100 million or so. Around $30 to $35 million a year, I think is a good sweet spot for Zion, and it should still have injury protections. I don't think it needs the weight clauses. I think you can do away with that, but I think it should still have injury protections. But he can't get more than 3 years right now. That's the length. So at least the Pelicans are limited in terms of that.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, I don't think he's going to get the max, but I do believe they could end up getting maybe a cost-controlled contract that, if everything bodes well with what you're saying, maybe in a year or two, we're looking at one of the better deals in the NBA. Sort of like how Andrew Wiggins was when he was on a more expensive contract when he got traded to the Timberwolves, and then they ended up signing him to, I think, 20 million average annual value, and that ended up being one of the better contracts for a player of Wiggins' caliber. To you, do you think anyone realistically sees Jordan Poole, Dejounte Murray, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Saddiq Bey, outside of obviously Zion, to remain on the team? Or if they trade Zion or any of those guys, it's going to be a fire sale for anybody that's 25 or above?
I think, first of all, like, I think Poole's available. I think if a team wanted Poole, they could have Poole. He's also an expiring contract this coming summer. And so there will be some optionality for the Pelicans to sort of see how the playoffs shake out, see if there's any dissatisfied teams with their current makeup or expensive teams that are just thinking they need to restructure how they are set up, and see if they can turn Poole's expiring into maybe one or two rotation level players. If they can do that, then I think, like, with their current 6 rotation level players, or vets, not rotation level, like with Dejounte, Herb, Zion, Trey, Saddiq Bey, and then their bigs in Eve Missi, I think I would say is like their like guy that can like really contribute right now. Like, if they can turn Poole's money into like 2 more rotation level guys, like, they'd be into a really good situation in terms of depth, because then Fears and Queen could probably take another step, and you'll get some reprieve if your main guys miss time. Right now, they just don't have that, and Poole just hasn't done anything to really earn his minutes, and it's better to just give them the Fears. Now, your question about the fire sale, I think everybody on the team has a price, but the price is set intentionally high for guys like Herb Jones and Trey Murphy. So if those prices are met, which is possible, we've seen teams give up 5 picks for Mikal Bridges, then those guys are available, but they're set to deter teams from asking.
Yeah, I was like in terms of like last offseason they went and got Kevon Looney, and now like DeAndre Jordan getting pretty much most of those, like even like 5 minutes to start the game, just to kind of have a starting rim protector in a way.
Mm-hmm.
What's Looney's role? Like, I know he's an older guy. He's not like the most vocal guy too in terms of like getting like vets. Like he's kind of more of a guy that's a veteran that just shows people by what he does in terms of like going to practice and everything. But like, what have you seen in terms of why Kevon Looney is not? He's not old, right? He can play more so than DeAndre Jordan, but they have very different games. Like, what's your take on why Looney hasn't been in the rotation really?
Yeah, look, unfortunately for Looney, the Pelicans have 3 young bigs that they would rather give minutes to, in Carlo, Makovich, Eve Missi, and Derek Queen. And the reason DeAndre is getting on the court now is that he rebounds better than all 3 of those players. Now, does he rebound better than Kevon Looney? Maybe, maybe not. but he is a better lob threat than Kevon Looney. So they like that spacing offensively more with DeAndre, and that rim protection because he can still block shots. It's not an ideal solution, but I think in a way, this is speculation, by the way, that the coaching staff is showing, hey, this is what this team can look like if you had someone in the mold of a DeAndre Jordan that could rebound and block shots and was a vertical spacer and good at setting screens. This team could be really good because DeAndre Jordan, to everybody's surprise, has won his minutes, and he continues to win his minutes. And I think it's just evidence that, like, hey, if you can just do the bare minimum at that position, the Pelicans could be really good. Now, if they can get someone that can be more than the bare minimum, like the guy that I have my eye on this summer that's a free agent is the local guy, Mitch Robinson. Now, he has health issues too, but if they can get a guy like Mitch Robinson in there who is a monster on the boards, he offers rim protection, they can load manage him because they have those young guys as well. He doesn't need to play 35 minutes a game, which can put him in positions to get hurt again. But yeah, that's the kind of player that I'd really be looking at. But Looney's fallen out of the rotation simply because I just don't think while I think he's sound defensively, he just doesn't offer the same kind of thing they're looking for offensively that Jordan provides. But both of them are really there to be vets. Like that's their role.
Just speaking on, like, you mentioned Mitchell Robinson and just the injury stuff. Like, in terms of the training staff, I'm just very curious about, like, what's different now compared to maybe last year, the year before. Because every year people always talk about they would be good if they weren't injured. Like, it's just a biggest hypothetical team like out there. So I'm just curious, what have you seen from the training staff that's different from now from the past?
I think they have gotten really unlucky. If you go down the list of injuries that the Pelicans players have gotten, like Herb Jones separated his shoulder diving for a loose ball and someone landed on it. Dejounte Murray had that freak Achilles incident. Prior to that, he broke his hand. Zion's his injury history to me is largely due to his own habits and his own preparation and some of his own personal, I think Zion had some people in his ecosystem that weren't necessarily giving him the best of advice when it came to that stuff. I do think the guy that they lost in Daniel Bove, who was, I think, their VP of performance and all of that, he is someone the players really, really trusted, and specifically Zion Williamson, Trey Murphy, and some of the other star players. And I think with a lot of the medical stuff, as it is with coaching and other stuff, when you deal with professional athletes, it requires buy-in and trust. He's someone that they trusted at a high level. And I think Zion has credited him in multiple interviews publicly for getting him into the place that he's at now, along with, Zion's personal trainer. That's a big loss for them. And the medical side of the front office, most of them are on final years of their deals. So it's going to look completely different come this summer. And it's something that I think people who follow the team need to be a little bit nervous about, because ownership wants to cut corners. They want operational costs to be lower. So there should be a healthy amount of skepticism that they're not going to invest in this area as much as David Griffin invested in this area. But we'll see, right? Like, the summer hasn't happened yet. It could be something completely different. It could be that, okay, all of these guys are out, done with their contracts. Dumars and Weaver are going to bring in a huge staff, and they're going to bring in all their own guys. It could be anything, right? But knowing the history of how this ownership group has operated and what their incentive structure is, like, that's an area of concern that I certainly have, and I think people need to be more aware of.
I thought that was like a great way of you putting it, how, ownership's going to want to cut corners and to look at it differently than how most people will look at roster construction, as you would just be thinking there is just one goal, and that is to eventually get that competitive advantage. But, things are done more ostensibly in the NBA, especially when you're dealing with certain ownership groups. But speaking of whatever, you've said everyone has a price. In terms of draft capital, players, or a combination of the two, What would you say is like a realistic return for the main guys in Zion, Trey Murphy, and Herb Jones, maybe even Sadiq Bey, that they would be like, we'll actually listen to an offer if this is kind of where the start of a trade framework is, in comparison to what we were hearing in the trade deadline? They were just shutting down allegedly anything they were getting.
Yeah, I think again, going back to the incentive structure of this team, they are strongly against the concept of rebuilding. So anything that kind of puts them on this pathway for a multi-year losing stretch, that's something that ownership wants to avoid strongly. So while I do think that at least Troy Weaver is very much into the draft and would love a high draft pick in this draft class, I think that's 100% true, and I think they would love. I mean, I think they would love their own pick back, for example. But I do think that some of those trade constructions for their key players probably have to feature sort of these young blue chip style players already in the league that can grow with their younger set of players, but are still good enough to compete. I would expect them to search. I mean, look, they when the Eve Missi trade rumors are going around, the most common guy rumored for him was Benedict Mathurin. Mathurin is kind of in that category of that young vet. He's coming up into his second deal. He's shown flashes with the Pacers, maybe in a change of scenery that he can really, really blow up. You know, we'll see. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily happening with the Clippers, but to give you the kind of like style of player that they might go for is that young guy with upside that, you know, can become a running mate for their core player. But I do think, like, you know, for a guy like Trey Murphy, it would have to be a combination of the young players and picks. Whereas with Zion, it may just be like one or the other. I don't think the league values Zion very highly. Yeah.
First, why do you think like Zion? I think obviously we all like have an idea why Zion's value isn't as high, but like, what do you think just in terms of why his value isn't as high as maybe a fan would think for a player who, yes, he hasn't impacted winning, but he has all the intangibles to impact winning? And then you mentioned this team doesn't rebuild, but it sounds like they're maybe following the path of the Washington Wizards under Tommy Shepard from a few years ago, when he had Kristaps Porzingis, Kyle Kuzma, and Bradley Beal, and he said, we're going to build from the middle, building from mediocrity to a contender. And I think most people have seen that. I don't think there's a proven champion that has ever done that from that model. What's your thoughts?
I think I got to think about this. I think we've seen successful middle builds. Houston Rockets, especially under Murray, have pulled off a number of different iterations of the middle build. The pivot that they had going from the Yao Ming era, you know, and Kevin Martin and Louis Scola and all those players, and they picked up James Harden, and, you know, you got to be in the right place at the right time, but they transitioned very seamlessly. The Pacers are another team that have historically refused to bottom out. Halliburton was the 12th. Halliburton was a trade. He wasn't even the 12th pick. He was a trade, right? They went from the Sabonis and Turner era straight into the Halliburton era, but they've done it in the past with where they take these young vets as sort of these second draft guys with Malcolm Brogdon. You know, even Victor Oladipo and Sabonis were second draft guys that they were like, hey, like, we're going to trade Paul George. We're not going to get any draft picks. We're going to get those two guys. And they had a bunch of playoff appearances with those guys. And then, like I said, they transitioned to the Halliburton era. The Boston Celtics, of course, have been able to sort of outsource their rebuilding, which I think what David Griffin intended to do. You know, some of these Milwaukee picks that the Pelicans have traded away, I think were done with that intention, right? They were supposed to sort of be the well that kept on running while Zion was heading into his prime. No, they don't really, you know, they have that top 4 protected version of that swap next year. It's a complicated one. I'm not going to get into the weeds of it, but the middle build is tricky. And I think any kind of team building philosophy you take, like, there are more paths to failures than there are to success. I think it requires a lot of ingenuity, a lot of honestly, there's luck, of course, but I think if your processes are right and you have a real good investment in like the data side of things, you can sort of spot where the wins and the margins are going to be, and you can take those gambles. So we'll see if they're going to be successful. We'll see. Whether it's too early right now for us to make any grand sweeping comments on their process. Like moving forward, we can only speak on what they've done to date. Uh, Obviously, a lot of what they've done this past offseason doesn't lend a lot of confidence, but maybe that's them. Hey, like it didn't work. We're going to pivot really quickly, and all of a sudden they do. They do strike gold, and maybe they make the right set of moves this summer. It's certainly possible. It's out there in front of them. It's going to be difficult for sure.
And to reiterate, what's your thoughts on the low value for Zion Williamson, where it seems like Trey Murphy and even Herb Jones might actually have more value around the league than Zion?
Yeah, right. Sorry, I forgot you had asked that question. I think Zion's value is directly related to his availability. If he had played 70 games a year for the last 5 years, there would be no question about if this guy is valuable or not. He probably would have multiple accolades under his belt. There are probably a lot more people employed with the Pelicans that have gotten fired or let go in the last, few years because they'd be making the playoffs, they'd be winning games. But unfortunately, that just hasn't been the case for him. And the league is, again, like everybody else. Hey, show us that you could stay healthy. Prove it. Prove it's not just a fluke. Prove it's not just this season type of thing. And although he does have protections in his contract, which make him a more valuable get than John Morant, who doesn't have the same protections in his contract, it's still, no one's going to give up premium assets for this guy unless he can prove that A, he can perform at that all NBA level, and B, he can do it for the course of a season without getting hurt or even multiple seasons.
Completely. You are what you can prove through your availability.
Just with Yves Missi, like last year, his rookie year, he played pretty well. Like he was getting a lot of double doubles, and this year there's since been some of that, but he hasn't getting a lot of playing time now. With Queen and Zion's been playing a lot more. And then he during the trade deadline he was apparently on the block. Like, I know he's also like earlier we were talking about there's a new regime, so they wouldn't even think twice to kind of trade him if they feel like it would help the team long term. What are your thoughts on? Do you see his future in New Orleans, or because there's a lot of guys that can use someone like him, like just a rim runner and just block shot, and those are like the prototypical like Luka type of bigs that teams like the Lakers would want.
Yeah, it's interesting with Eve specifically because, like you said, there was a lot of buzz leading up to deadline that he might get moved. He's not someone that this regime drafted, and he clearly plays minutes in a position that the guy they did draft should be playing in their eyes. But the thing with Eve is he's been one of their more impactful players, just from like in terms of impacting winning and impacting the plus minus. Like they're better with him on the court than they are off the court with him. And so going into the trade deadline, he was playing so well that I think they realized that the few seconds or so that might be out there for him are just not worth it, worth giving up on a cost-controlled young impact big right now. And so they made that decision to keep him. Now, you do have to wonder from a cynical level if they decided to not make some of the moves that were on the table because they wanted to make the pick to Atlanta as worse as possible. That's one way to look at things. But just with regarding Eve, I think his productivity, at least from a scoring standpoint, definitely took a step back because there was no playmaking guard. I think he plays best with Dejounte, a guy like Dejounte out there. And Dejounte's only just gotten back. And even now, their minutes don't overlap all that much because the Pelicans are starting a small unit, whereas Eve's coming off the bench. But you mentioned Luka, like that is the ideal guy. You want a rim rolling big to play with. There was that joke, like DeAndre Ayton said he doesn't want to be Clint Capella. Eve is happy being Clint Capella. He's happy getting the offensive rebounds and running the lanes and just trying to outwork people. So I do think if a team with a high-level playmaker acquires him, we'll probably see a better version of him than we're seeing now. But I will say for James Borrego and their staff, he is definitely the big they trust the most to close games with, especially when it comes to defense. Like that's the guy that they're like, okay, like we have complete faith on him being on the court, and he's gonna hang defensively, and he's gonna battle on the offensive glass and make a difference.
Completely. And he's a guy that if they were to keep him, he is the type of guy who could clean up the defensive mistakes that Derek Queen would allow, or the limitations he has because of him being not the longest front court player.
I think he's kind of like the guy that Zion and Queen are not good at, like rim protecting, defensive, like just switching and stuff. Like he's everything that they're not.
And does the dirty work. They don't do the dirty work, right?
Yeah.
Like, they get the assists, they get the points, but like, are they down there scrapping? Are they down there, like battling, setting hard screens? Like, no, they're not doing. I mean, again, to Zion's credit, he is, I think, in my opinion, transformed his game a lot this season. Would they be playing a lot harder if they were playing for the playoffs right now? Sure. But Zion, I think, has overhauled his game. This is the most off ball that he's ever played. His efficiency as a result has climbed back up. His, the percent of the looks he gets at the rim relative to the rest of his shots has climbed back up. The assisted number of looks he gets back has climbed back up. And so there's a lot of things trending in the right direction. And Zion, like, again, to his credit, has bought in doing that stuff. But you're right that, like, you can't teach motor for some players. Right. Some players just have it. Like, nobody has to teach Josh Hart how to play hard, right? Like that, he just has it. So Eve's one of those guys that's just how he's going to play every time he's on the court.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. He's real fun to watch. Speaking of a guy who honestly, when I watch him play, I don't know if it's stoic or I don't want to say disinterested, but like he's really just not gotten a fair shot at opportunities. And it's a player that would, in theory, help them. Jordan Hawkins. He's kind of seen his role reduce. And I know, again, going to the regime and everything, this isn't the one that brought him in. But for being a first-round pick who's supposed to be a three-point shooter with a little bit of secondary playmaking, we understood his rookie year. He was forced to be a ball handler when he wasn't because of injury. And since then, it's just feels like they just don't play him unless it's garbage time or injuries.
I mean this with all the respect possible, because Jordan Hawkins is going to be is a better basketball player than 99.9% of the world. I just don't think he is a good NBA level basketball player. Certainly not one that impacts winning. He's his shot is the main thing that's holding him back, because he just doesn't go in at a consistent enough rate. But the other thing with him is when that shot's not going in, is he provides absolutely nothing that a team needs. He doesn't provide rebounding, defense, anything, really, just anything. And so not even secondary playmaking. And so those players who are make or break with just their 3-point shot, like, I'm sorry, man, he's shooting, I think, like 26 or 28% from the field or something absurdly low. I think it's a horrendous number at this point. But yes, some of that's because the minutes have been up and down. But I do think he was given a fair shot of the last 3 seasons. They picked up his 4th-year option, and that's this regime. They picked it up sight unseen. And I think some of it was like, hey, maybe like we should pick it up and it's not going to hurt us in case he pops off this season. But like, I think there were a handful of people, and me amongst them, who were skeptical of him as a prospect coming in at draft time because of these reasons, because he doesn't do anything outside shoot. And yeah, like that's just unfortunately been the case for him at the NBA level. But, again, this guy is probably going to kill it. If he doesn't stick in the league, like you might hear him in Europe just being like the all-time leading scorer there or something. I don't know.
Hey, there's a silver lining for anything.
I think kind of like his calling card, right, coming into the draft was shooting, and everyone was raving about his shooting. Everyone knew that he couldn't play defense. People were going to target him, but everyone was just like, if he can shoot, like he'll be able to get minutes. But he has not shown he can shoot. I think his rookie year, it might have been his best year. His rookie year, the second year, in terms of like he had a couple like 30-point games, and like had like over 5 threes like each game. But then since I think just his confidence level has just been down the drain now. It's just he's not getting the time anymore. And just new guys like Fears comes in like a rookie. You just see these guys coming, like younger guys in him coming and get the time. And he's literally out there. I see him like he's kind of like the first or second one to leave the locker room a lot of times.
Yeah, I think you're right about the confidence level. I do think like Willie Green specifically, like I've heard the stories, like he was really hard on Hawkins, and he contributed a lot to those initial like minutes just kind of being yanked around, and there's a lot I think that went down that contributed to Willie eventually being let go and the locker losing complete support of him. And I think a lot of it, not a lot of it, but certainly a part of it was, how his relationship was with Jordan Hawkins and how he interacted with those kind of players. So I think that, yes, you're absolutely right that his confidence is just probably at an all-time low. And I don't think he has been given any sort of investment from the front office either, right? Outside of them picking up his team option, like, they're bringing in guys to replace him at every position. So it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, you just got to you got to fight through it. You got to keep putting the work in. And he does. He's a professional. He stays late after every practice. He's playing in their, sorry about that. He's playing in their conditioning games for the guys that are not in the rotation. So he's a good kid. Like just from someone who is like a part of the team and not going to rock the boat, like he's a great kid. Like he's not once been someone that, despite everything, has like, let's say, like, openly pouted or openly like sulked or criticized or said that, hey, this isn't fair, that kind of stuff. Now he's just kind of like taking it in stride, which is good.
Just jumping from Hawkins to like a former first round pick and then to one that you kind of just gave away. Like I know publicly Dumars and maybe even Weaver are saying like, no, we don't regret it. But like behind the scenes, do you get the sense that maybe we shouldn't have done that so quickly?
I can't speak for those guys. They are not very public facing, and so it's difficult to get into their thought processes. And I think that's been the case for across the board with media. And I think some of it may have to do with how much they were criticized during the time of the trade. And I think they just kind of retreated post that. But like, look, Dumars has given one press conference a season. That's when he fired Willie Green. And he did that press conference with media on Zoom with the camera off. And then 20 minutes later, we were at the practice facility for practice and he's right there at practice. So it's like, that's an interaction that could have happened in person. I can only hope that if there's not regret, there is a sense of, well, hey, whatever our processes were that led to this decision, we have to reevaluate those to make sure we can be better next time. I can only hope. I do know from the moment that trade happened, pretty much the whole building was like, wow, how? Like, so that should kind of, put into perspective that where the power lies in terms of decision making, and if people could change it, they would. Now with them, I have no clue.
It's definitely a great way how you put it, because especially I didn't know that they weren't that forward facing. I knew that Troy Weaver had some eccentric personality displays in Detroit, but it's been kind of, at least in that sense, I hadn't heard anything out of New Orleans. But James Borrego, I've been able to speak to him a couple times pre and post game when they played the Heat, and he's a very, I think, put together person. And I knew last year they wanted to make him head coach. Gail Benson basically stopped that because she's friends with Willie Green's wife. And now James comes in. Will James get an opportunity to at least be a candidate for the job search, or is the job search over, sort of like a Brian Keefe Wizards, where they're going to have a quote unquote search and then just announce 3 months later that, oh yeah, he's coach?
Yeah, look, I think if it were up to me, James Borrego should just have the interim tag removed. Now I understand. Look, I understand the merits of, hey, look, we want to run a full job search. We want to turn over every stone, every corner, and then decide. And I think that's actually a perfectly valid way to do things. And if that's the route they want to go down, great. But I think we've all kind of heard the intel around them. That's not how they operate. That's not how they evaluate things. They just have ideas and guys in mind, and then they go do that. And the guys that they have in mind right now are Darvin Ham and Jamal Mosley, who I think there is a lot of chatter around the league that he is going to be let go if Orlando doesn't do so well in the playoffs, or maybe his fate is already sealed. We've kind of already seen the tensions around Mosley and some of the players with the Magic. The most recent spat with Paulo Banchero and Mosley, that where they kind of exchanged some criticism at each other through the media. It was kind of bizarre there, but the same thing with how Dumars was hired. There was no search that was done that led him to get the position. The Benson group already knew from a long time, like, hey, when we get rid of Griff, this is the guy we're bringing in. So in that regard, I hope Borrego gets a fair shake. I do know the players respect the hell out of him. They love the energy that he's brought to practices and the level of detail and attention that he goes into these film sessions and how he structures everything. And from a relationship standpoint, like, people just rave about how he actually like connects with people and cares about them. And that's, before we get to any of the on-court stuff, where I think he's completely transformed how this team runs its offense. And again, they've decentralized their offense away from Zion in a way that's become increasingly effective. And that was a challenge that Willie Green would talk about every single season. Oh, we don't want to be relying on one guy. And then as soon as Zion would get hurt, the team would fall apart. They've largely accomplished the decentralization of the offense from Zion. And he's developing the young guys. Eve's having a great year. Fears has gotten better and better as the year's gone on. And so, Sadiq Bey has turned into a legitimate, NBA starting level guy who's closing out games for them in the clutch. So I think Borrego has certainly done enough to where he needs a look at the head coach. And I would respect that if they decide to do a full, actual valid search and then they pick the actual best candidate. I think that's valid. I would not respect if they ran no search and they just kind of picked the guys they wanted. That would be the worst of all worlds.
So Kevin Ollie being your head coach is just not acceptable. I'm being half serious when I say that.
With respect to Kevin Ollie, I'm sure he's a great guy. I would believe that there are better head coaches out there.
I have this premonition that it's going to be, if it's not James Borrego, it's going to be Kevin Ollie. No fact, like Kevin Ollie, I loved him at UConn and stuff, but
I would key in on Ham and Mosley. Those are guys I'd watch out for.
Now, basically, that's everything we had to ask you, Shammit. Like, right, Shammit, right?
Yeah,
Shammit. I literally said it wrong, and then Shammit. So I wanted to make sure. No, my name's Cyro, so like Cyro, like everyone butchers it. So I feel like it's your name is something that defines you, so to get it right. Now, Sam, did you have anything else to ask? If not, if you want to shout out your links.
Just like super quick, like you haven't talked much about Trey Murphy. I just wanted to ask, like, he's been with the team his whole career. Like, I know he wouldn't mind getting traded in a way. Like, he wouldn't mind playing somewhere else. But like, from what you've seen and just you seeing his whole career there, like, do you feel like they're going to trade him? Like, because in terms of value, I feel like he is the best. They would get the most value for him. But do they see him as a piece for their retooling, I guess you would call it? Like, what's your thoughts on him?
Yeah, look, I think they view him as a guy that pairs perfectly with their star draft pick and Queen, right? And Fears, right? And Trey is someone that pairs perfectly with anybody because he's a off-ball, highly efficient offensive player that can shapeshift into whatever offensive role you really need him to outside of being like a high usage creator. And so I think they know what they have in him and they've set the price for him appropriately high. And if someone comes and meets that price, then I do think that, that's a trade that they would entertain, but for the most part, they want to move forward with Trey Murphy. They want to move forward with Herb Jones and their core. Like that is their plan. That's their vision. But shoot, man, like if Utah offers them the 4th pick in this draft, like how are they going to act? I don't know. It's so difficult to predict what's going to happen at draft time and just how much they value some other people or some of these prospects that are in this year's draft. That is the biggest wild card for me.
Completely. That was well said. Who would have thought Jaren Jackson Jr. was going to be in Utah? But if the price is met, why would you say no? Basically, that's everything we had. Thank you for coming on, man. You said In the NO is your Substack. Any other links, Twitter, anything else that people can get on to your coverage?
Yeah, so indno.substack.com has the writing, has the podcast, which is also called In the NO or In the Know. It's available on YouTube, Spotify. You can follow me on social media, both on Blue Sky and Twitter at Fear the Brown, or you can search my name, Shamit Dua, and I'll be there.
Sweet. Shammit, really appreciate you coming on here, telling us things I feel like most people didn't know about the Pelicans, and really appreciate your work and your coverage.
Of course, anytime. Glad we can make this happen.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you. Sam, anything else before we get out of here?
No, I appreciate you coming on. I know we've been trying to work you into the schedule, like I feel like over a month now, but appreciate you finally getting some time for us, and we kind of got this going, really.
Yeah, for sure.
Sweet. Hey, man, have a great rest of your week and enjoy your evening.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Cheers.